Today I want to talk about serving a little bit, and I want to celebrate something. I got with the staff this past week, and I tried to figure out, how many people does it take in our Coastline crew, that's our volunteer team here at Coastline, how many people does it take to make a weekend service happen, including, we got 5 areas. We've got children's ministry, we've got hospitality, we've got tech team, we got the greeting team, and we've got the band. I don't think I missed anybody. Yeah, setup. No, that was it. I said hospitality twice. Setup team, and then we've got the band. So in 5 teams, we figured out that it takes something like 42 people each weekend to do what we do here in service on the weekend. That's pretty crazy, right? That's a whole lot going on. Here's the thing. A lot of those people help out behind the scenes. You don't ever see what they do. But I want to just take a second, if you will. Can we go ahead and just, if I'm going to call you guys out. If you're a part of the Coastline crew, if you help out at all here at Coastline, I want you to just stand in your seat, if you will. And can we give some of these guys an applause? Go ahead and stand up if you're part of the Coastline crew. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you so much. I want to tell you guys, when it comes to the crew, if it wasn't for our crew, we would not be doing service here on the weekends. We got people that show up at 6:30 in the morning, or not 6:30, 7:30 in the morning, and they set up, they put out stage equipment, lights, and everything like that. We got people during the week that are building, the stuff that's going up on the screens and everything like that. We got kids, ministry volunteers that are preparing during the week or coming in a little bit early to set up their areas, and we couldn't do it without them, and I'm so very thankful that our crew, the people that are part of our volunteer team, have such a servant's heart, because I think that has the ability to make all the difference when it comes to what God's going to do with us here through Coastline. This past week, I was hanging out with Eric Lancaster. Eric's one of the guys that's on staff here. He does connections and outreach. He's the director of connections and outreach. And of 4 people that we have on staff, 2 of them are full-time employees that volunteer their time, which is amazing. And then we've got Eric and myself. And Eric is, he does a great job with trying to connect people in these teams, as well as connect people. If you've ever filled out a hello card, you've probably seen an email from him. But this past week, we were going around and we're doing some different, not chores we had to do, but running errands, and we found ourselves having a tech issue, and so we went to Best Buy, and so we met with the Geek Squad there, which I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to go insane for a little bit, go hang out at the Geek Squad or the DMV. Both those places are those are not of God. And so we're hanging out there, and 30 or 40 minutes goes by, and poor Eric, he's trying to do work on his cell phone, and I'm trying to talk with the geek guy, the geek, whatever you call him, I don't know, the squad guy. And he's sitting there emailing, and he doesn't even notice that, I don't know how long this happened for, but he doesn't even notice that while he's sitting there emailing, up comes this sweet little old lady with a cane. And she's got to be 98 years old or something like that. She is and she's got her iPad. She's going to talk to the Geek Squad person. Well, the problem is the waiting area for the Geek Squad is completely full. Eric's in the last seat. So here's Eric emailing, and here's this almost 100-year-old lady with a cane standing next to Eric. And I don't know how long this went on for. I just remember turning around, and Eric realized what had happened, and he was like, oh my gosh. And so he's getting up and trying to give his seat to this lady. And he says, sit down. And it was kind of funny. I busted his chops later on because I was like, dude, how are you going to be you're going to make sweet old ladies stand up when you got to sit down? That's a jerk move, right? He's like, stop, that's not, he was mortified. If you saw his face, he had no idea. The crazy thing, though, was, I see this sweet lady, and, it was no big deal to her. She wasn't expecting anybody to get up whatsoever. She was just standing there because that's what she did. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, years ago, that is not what would happen, right? Years ago, if there was someone standing that needed to have a seat, man, everyone sitting down would have got up and said, here, you can have my seat. Or would at least yelled at Eric and told him to get his butt up, right? Yeah. And so I'm seeing this happen, and I'm realizing that like part of it is, I mean, Eric's got a great serving heart. He wants to serve and help the people around him. And so he like all of a sudden something clicked and he got up and he did it. But I realized that the world that we live in today, it's not necessarily built that same way. See, we're not so much selfless here, especially in America, as we are self-centered. And I'm not saying everyone, but I'm saying if we were to take a theme of America today, for the most part, a lot of people would see Americans as a very self-centered country. It's all about me. I want to have the nice car, right? Have the new Apple cell phone or something like that. By the way, if you just got the new Apple cell phone, don't feel bad. It's no big deal. I'm not trying to get harp on you or anything like that, right? Someone's trying to slip their phone in their pocket. Like, I didn't get it. I don't know what he's talking about. Who's he preaching to? But we want the newest and the nicest thing. And it's kind of, sometimes it's hard for us. It's hard for even me to not think in a way that's just me. What can I get? What do I need? You know, it's just my world. Everyone else is living in it. But I don't think that's kind of what God intended for us. I don't think that when it comes to our fresh start, I don't think that needs to be a theme of our life. I think that there's something a little bit different that he's intended for us. Last week at the end of my sermon, I got up here and I quoted. That is not a word. Wow. That is quoted in scripture together. Tweet it, trademark it, quoted. Sheesh, that was interesting. I quoted a scripture, is what I was looking for, out of John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35. And it says this is Jesus speaking, by the way. It says, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." Many of you have read this before or seen it before. If you were here last week, you heard me recite it or quote it at the end. This was Jesus speaking. He clearly says that we're supposed to love one another. But this past week when I went back to look at it, I didn't realize like exactly how much like he meant this. This, in the book of John, this place in which Jesus is talking, this is towards the end of Jesus' ministry. This is right before he's going to be arrested and put on the cross. And him and the disciples are up in the upper room and they're having their last meal together. And Jesus looks at them and says, "Love one another. Even as I have loved you, you should love one another. And by this, they will know about me." Now here's the thing. Jesus is telling them to love. He's telling them, "I love you." But it doesn't stop there. The crazy thing is, Jesus knows what's going to happen next. So Jesus knows that down the table from him is this guy named Judas. And Judas is going to turn him in for money. He's going to totally just give him up, doesn't care anything about him. He says, "Because I've loved you, you need to go love other people." Peter, which is just down the table from him. Peter, he knows, is about ready to deny Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Jesus knows it's happening. But Jesus continues, says, "I love you. And because I've loved you, you need to continue to love the people around you." And then he does something incredible. He takes a towel and a basin, a bowl, and he starts to wash his disciples' feet. Now here's the crazy thing. This is a job that if this were to happen in a home during that time, this is something that would have happened by the lowest of the low servants. This was the job that you did not want to have if you were a servant. Because people in those days, they wore flip-flops everywhere. And they didn't walk on like asphalt and sidewalks. They walked on dirt roads where camels walked. And camels, guess what they did on the dirt roads? Yeah, they used the bathroom, we know. Not only that, like the streets were like they were the sewer system for those days. And so anyone, if you had bath water or something got thrown out, if you had sewage, it got thrown out and so literally the servant in those days that was in charge of this job was like, this was a dirty job. Like Mike Rowe, is that his name? Like this would have been one of the worst jobs you'd ever had. Jesus, the teacher, the leader, humbles himself and does this as an act of serving to his disciples. And we know from just a month ago, we talked about when he came, that this was a theme of his life, this idea of humility and serving. In Mark chapter 10, verse 45, it says this, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And he gave his life as a ransom for many." I believe that if we call ourselves Christians, which means we are followers of Christ, that means we're supposed to act in a way that he would act and do life the way that he might do life. I believe that self-centeredness is probably not a theme that needs to be in our life. I think that we need to be serving one another. Now here's the thing, I want to stop real quick. This is not a sermon to try to get you to be a part of the Coastline crew. If you want to be, Coastline, part of my job is to help people, help Christians grow. And so if you want to take the next step into serving, I'm going to help you do that today. But let's take that off the table, because I don't want something from you. I want something for you here today. I believe as Christians, we are called to serve one another, to love one another, because Jesus did it, and also because I know that has the ability to change the world that we live in and where we work and where we play. It has the ability to change our families in a positive way. In the book of Galatians, Paul, which was this guy that actually in the Bible times, when Peter was around, after Jesus went to heaven, Paul was a guy actually named Saul, and he was a Pharisee, and he persecuted Christians. He was literally killing people that were the followers of the way, or that were following Jesus. And all of a sudden, Jesus has this connection with him and stops him and changes his life forever. And Saul changed his name to Paul, and Paul went on to write most of the New Testament and start many churches. And at some point in this city of Galatia, Paul writes to this church talking to them about what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be living their life. These guys had grown up in the Hebrew culture where there's so many rules. There's something like 600 laws or something like that, or maybe there's probably even a little bit more than that. And they know that, hey, these are laws that we're supposed to live by. But then here comes Jesus, and he changes everything. And so at some point, Paul addresses this, and he tells them this in Galatians chapter 5, verse 13 and 14. It says this, it says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love." Let me read that again. "Serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. Love your neighbor as you love yourself." You know, sometimes I'll go and I'll do something nice for my wife, right? I'll try to take her out on a date or something like that. And, it's funny. The times that I like to do it that mean the most to me are not the times when it's like an anniversary or Valentine's Day, right? Because you're expected to do something then. But like the true times, and she wouldn't even agree with this, the times where it like means the most is when it's not something like I'm trying to get anything in return. It's not for any reason or purpose. It's just because I love her, right? I remember one of the best presents that Erica ever, or she would say she ever got, was like something I thought was kind of, I'm not going to say dumb. I just said it, so I'll say it's out there. I brought her candy one time, her and Olivia was a little girl. She was a little baby at the time, and she liked these little puffs things. And I brought them just a little bag of candy each, and I made them in the shape of a heart and put them on the coffee table. And I came out, and Erica saw them, and she's like bawling. I'm like, that was like $3. What's going on? This ain't diamond bracelet or nothing. It's candy. But it was because it was from my heart. She knew it was out. It was because I loved her. It wasn't because I needed anything or wanted anything. It was just because I loved her. I think that we need to be looking at the world that we live in the same light. If God has told us, Jesus told us that we're supposed to love one another, if we're supposed to serve one another, it shouldn't be out of getting anything in return. It should just be out of love, a loving heart. It's not about the reward that we're going to get from the person. But I guarantee you, if we will turn around and we will serve one another, if we will serve the people in our neighborhoods, if we'll love on them, it will change the world that we live in. I know this because it has changed my life. I met Erica about 10 years ago, and someone asked me if I would serve on a team, on a worship team at a church. And I played bass back in the day, and so I was like, sure, I'll show up. And so I brought my bass, and I played, and I practiced, and I got ready. And I remember while I was up on stage, seeing this cute little blonde-haired girl that was scrambling around, and she was setting up coffee, and she was setting up little snacks and stuff like that. And then I remember during the worship time that she was over off in the corner, and she didn't know that anyone was watching her. She didn't know I was watching her, but she was just worshiping God. She didn't care about the people around her. She was just spending time with Jesus. And I remember looking at her, and I wasn't checking her out because that would be wrong to do for the bass player to check out a girl during church, right? That would be wrong. I wouldn't have done that. But no, I remember seeing her and seeing what she was doing, and I remember praying. I said, God, I was like, I want a wife like that one day. I want a wife that loves people enough to give of her time and to serve people. I want a wife that loves you so much she doesn't care what anybody thinks about her when she worships. And I also said, and if she looks that hot, that wouldn't be bad either. I just slipped that one in. And it worked out. I mean, obviously, like God answered my prayer. It was amazing. It was great. But I started thinking about it. Erica didn't ever go to church. She didn't grow up in church or anything like that. At one time, she showed up to a church. At some point, she started hearing the message of Jesus and what Jesus has done, and she gave her life. And she asked, "What's next? What do I do?" And part of what she did, she asked someone, and someone said, "Well, why don't you help out and serve?" And she said, "Okay." And she jumped in with both feet. She was involved in everything. She was involved in youth ministry. She was involved in the kids ministry. She was involved with the donuts and the coffee and everything else in between. I, on the other hand, I grew up in church. So mom had us at church, anytime there was a serving opportunity, it was oh, we're showing up. Pressure washing, we're showing up. We're cleaning out closets, we're showing up. Anything that could happen. It was crazy. But if it hadn't been for my mom teaching me about serving, if it hadn't been for Erica asking someone and someone saying, well, maybe you should serve, we wouldn't have never met each other. We wouldn't have connected. Now, I'm not saying if you serve on a team, God's going to bring you the wife you want or the husband you want or whatever, anything like that. That's not what it's about. But I know that serving very much has changed my life. Outside of even just marrying, finding the woman I'm going to marry because of it, it has changed my life. And I guarantee you, if you asked her, she'd say it changed her as well. I believe that serving has the ability to change the world that we live in. And I don't think it's just a biblical principle. I think it has to do with who we are, just even as humans. I think it's something that we all know on the inside. I want you to check out this video real quick. This is a guy, he's a behavior analyst or whatever, and I started to watch this. It was a TED Talk. If you ever want to feel dumb, watch 5 or 6 TED Talks in a row, and you'll feel very humbled. But go ahead and check this guy out. I loved what he had to say about this.
So I want you to look around the room for a minute and try to find the most paranoid person here. And then I want you to point at that person for me. Okay, don't actually do it. But as an organizational psychologist, I spend a lot of time in workplaces, and I find paranoia everywhere. Paranoia is caused by people that I call takers. Takers are self-serving in their interactions. It's all about, what can you do for me? The opposite is a giver. It's somebody who approaches most interactions by asking, what can I do for you? And I wanted to give you a chance to think about your own style. We all have moments of giving and taking. Your style is just how you treat most of the people most of the time, your default. And I found that most people are right in the middle between giving and taking. They choose this third style called matching. If you're a matcher, you try to keep an even balance of give and take, quid pro quo. I'll do something for you if you do something for me. And that seems like a safe way to live your life. But is it the most effective and productive way to live your life? Now, I studied dozens of organizations, thousands of people. I had engineers measuring their productivity. I looked at medical students' grades, even salespeople's revenue. And unexpectedly, the worst performers in each of these jobs were the givers. The engineers who got the least work done were the ones who did more favors than they got back. They were so busy doing other people's jobs, they literally ran out of time and energy to get their own work completed. In medical school, the lowest grades belong to the students who agree most strongly with statements like, "I love helping others," which suggests the doctor you ought to trust is the one who came to med school with no desire to help anybody. And then in sales, too, the lowest revenue accrued to the most generous salespeople. So just out of curiosity, how many of you self-identify more as givers than takers or matchers? Raise your hands. Okay, would have been more before we talked about these data. But actually, it turns out there's a twist here, because givers are often sacrificing themselves, but they make their organizations better. We have a huge body of evidence, many, many studies, looking at the frequency of giving behavior that exists in a team or an organization. And the more often people are helping and sharing their knowledge and providing mentoring, the better organizations do on every metric we can measure. Higher profits, customer satisfaction, employee retention, even lower operating expenses. So givers spend a lot of time trying to help other people and improve the team, and then unfortunately they suffer along the way. And I want to talk about what it takes to build cultures where givers actually get to succeed. So I wondered then, if givers are the worst performers, who are the best performers? And let me start with the good news. It's not the takers. Takers tend to rise quickly, but also fall quickly in most jobs. And they fall at the hands of matchers. If you're a matcher, you believe in an eye for an eye, a just world. And so when you meet a taker, you feel like it's your mission in life to just punish the hell out of that person. And that way justice gets served. Well, most people are matchers, and that means if you're a taker, it tends to catch up with you eventually. What goes around will come around. And so the logical conclusion is it must be the matchers who are the best performers. But they're not. In every job, in every organization I've ever studied, the best results belong to the givers again. So take a look at some data that I gathered from hundreds of salespeople tracking their revenue. What you can see is that the givers go to both extremes. They make up the majority of the people who bring in the lowest revenue, but also the highest revenue. And the same patterns were true for engineers' productivity and medical students' grades. Givers are overrepresented at the bottom and at the top of every success metric that I can track. Which raises the question, how do we create a world where more of these givers get to excel? And I want to talk about how to do that not just in businesses, but also in nonprofits, schools, even governments. I think the most important thing, if you want to build a culture of successful givers, is to be thoughtful about who you let onto your team. I figured you want a culture of productive generosity, you should hire a bunch of givers. But I was surprised to discover, actually, that that was not right. That the negative impact of a taker on a culture is usually double to triple the positive impact of a giver. Let even one taker into a team, and you will see that the givers will stop helping. They'll say, I'm surrounded by a bunch of snakes and sharks, why should I contribute? Whereas if you let one giver into a team, you don't get an explosion of generosity. More often, people are like, great, that person can do all our work. It's not about bringing in the givers. It's about weeding out the takers. And if you can do that well, you'll be left with givers and matchers. The givers will be generous because they don't have to worry about the consequences. And the beauty of the matchers is that they follow the norm. So if we do all this well, if we can weed takers out of organizations, if we can make it safe to ask for help, if we can protect givers from burnout, and make it okay for them to be ambitious in pursuing their own goals, as well as trying to help other people, we can actually change the way that people define success. Instead of saying it's all about winning a competition, people will realize success is really more about contribution. I believe that the most meaningful way to succeed is to help other people succeed. And if we can spread that belief, we can actually turn paranoia upside down. I want to live in a world where givers succeed, and I hope you will help me create that world. Thank you. Yeah. So I want you to look around the room for a minute.
No,
and
we don't.
try
We're
to
not gonna
find.
do it. I already did it once. Sorry. Yeah, man, I believe that very much. I want to make sure that part of what I know that God has called us to do as a church is to have a positive impact on New Smyrna Beach, and Edgewater, and Port Orange, and Oak Hill, and Samsula. I know that the number one way that will happen is if in our fresh start, in this new year, and us starting things brand new, if we will step out and love on the people around us, if we will serve the people around us, I know that it'll have a lasting impact on their lives. I understand it's tough because there's some people out there that we don't like, right? But look at Jesus. As he's getting down to do one of the dirtiest jobs and wash his disciples' feet, he understands that, Peter, as I'm doing this, I know that in just a few hours you're going to deny me. As he's doing this, Judas, I know that you've taken money and that you're going to give me over to the people that are going to arrest me. It's hard to love on people that we don't like. But I believe that if we'll do that, if we will love, if we will be givers and not takers, if we'll be givers in the community that God has placed us in, I believe that we have the opportunity to change that community forever in a positive way. And I want to challenge you to do that. I want to live in a world that where people love one another, that has a tight-knit, close community. And I know that doesn't happen if we're takers. I know it happens if we're givers. It happens if we will love on one another, if we'll serve people. And so this is what I want to challenge you to do, two things. One is this: if you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus, if you don't have a relationship with him, I want to tell you, the best decision I've ever made in my entire life is to give my life over to him and to start to have this one-on-one relationship with him. Jesus came to this earth as a carpenter's son in a manger, which was a dirty place to be born. He didn't come as this king wrapped in silk. He lived a life of a carpenter's son, which was not an easy life to live. And even the people that he had follow him, they weren't the best of the best. And the way that he lived and the way that he died was extremely difficult. But he did it to serve and pay the price for the things that keep me from God's best, that keep you from God's best. So if you're here today and you've never accepted Jesus, I want to challenge you today to start a relationship with him. I know that it'll change your life forever. If you're a follower of Christ, I want to challenge you to do this: start serving your community. If you're looking for a place to serve, we have lots of places here in Coastline that I would love to direct you to. But if you don't want to serve in the church, I know some great places outside of the church that you can help. Chip and Don Clark at Frog Ministries, there's some great friends of mine. Chip and Don bust their hump day in and day out, Monday through Thursday, to provide for a free thrift store for families in need. And they're always in need of people volunteering, people showing up, whether it's for an hour or a couple hours, whether it's 1 week or every day of the week. They could use some help serving our community. And so if you've got time to serve, we've got a sign-up sheet at the info booth today that we'd love for you to sign up and go help them. I'll get you contact and connected with Chip. And I promise you, you will have a positive impact on our community. If you want to serve here at church, man, I want to tell you about a guy named Rick. Rick started coming to church just 2 weeks ago. And Rick, I didn't know it at the time, but Rick is actually a guy that I knew more than 2 decades ago. Rick was coming in and sitting in the back, and he said, "You don't remember me, but me and my wife used to teach you in Sunday school when you were a little kid." And sure enough, I did. I immediately remembered him when he told me about it. I remember him and his wife coming and giving of their time, hanging out with a bunch of, we must have been fourth or fifth grade boys. I'm going to tell you something about fourth, fifth grade boys. They smell terrible, okay? Those kids, you got to beat them to get them washed, right? They won't get in the shower. But they served, they gave of their time each week for I don't know how long. just to love on students. And I know that today, the funny thing was this past Thursday, he actually came to men's breakfast, and I'm sitting across the table from him. I'm saying, you know what, I remember some of the things that you taught me. There were some things that I could recite that I remember him telling me about. Him loving on me and talking about the love of Jesus. Because of him, because of just the couple hours that he put in, he's had a lasting impact on my life. And one of the reasons that I'm here today, the reason why Eric and I get to plant a church in New Smyrna Beach, because one guy just gave a couple hours of his time and loved on the people around him. I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for him, I might not be here today. The crazy thing is, he could have done something else with his time. He could have stayed home. He could have spent time watching football or watching TV or whatever. He could have slept in a little bit. But because he gave just a little bit of his time, he's had, continuing to have an impact on my life and even on your lives. I know that there's probably 25, 30 kids over in this room right here. I don't know which one of them is going to be the church planner or the pastor's wife or the worship leader. I don't know what people coming through our doors here this next week are suffering with depression or addiction and just need some love. I don't know, but I know that if you will spend a little bit of time and love on them and serve them, if you'll serve the people in your community, if you'll serve your neighbors, man, God will change the world that you live in for the better. And that's why we're all here, is to let God have his way in us and in our community. And so this is what I want you to do here this morning. If you're interested in serving on a team here at Coastline Church, there is I'm in cards on all your chairs. We don't have membership classes here at Coastline. We say if you're a part of the crew or if you're in a circle group, we consider you a member of our church. And so if you want to take either one of those steps, I want to challenge you to fill out that card. And here today, as you exit, there's going to be two ladies on either side of the doors that are going to be holding baskets. I want you to fill that out, and I want you to drop it in the basket. And as you're doing, you're just saying, hey, I want to serve our church community. If you don't want to serve our church community, that's all right. But I'm going to tell you, it's not all right to not serve anywhere. Be a giver. Don't be a taker. If you're interested in serving at Frog, we got a sign-up sheet in the back of the room. If you're interested in serving in another area, let me know. I'm on Facebook. You can hit me up, ask me some questions, or you can email us at hello@coastlinensb.com, and we'll love to get you connected in a place that you can serve. I know that if you serve, it'll change the world that you're in, and it'll change you for the better. And that's what I want for you. I think that's what God wants for you.